Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. 10 years ago, Bob's wife put an empty jar in the kitchen near the coffee maker where her husband was supposed to carefully drop $1 every time you swear profanely. As the years went by, the jar slowly filled up, and then, usually around Thanksgiving, it emptied. My wife would spend part of it on decorating the house for the holiday and donate the rest to the local church's Poor Relief Fund. That even, by the way, was donated from time to time. However, a long period of marriage and sincere feelings of people mutually loved back in high school classes did their job. And by the time Bob reached retirement age, he had weaned himself off the habit of swearing. But tonight on October night, he swore so long and flowery that the jar could have filled up in no time. However, his Stephanie was present at this moment on duty. She would have understood her husband, because what Bob and his partner faced in the last dying hours of their tour of duty was beyond anything the police and the township had faced in many years. Not that there wasn't crime in this Texas town. Sure, there was. There were fatalities too. But the fact that the partners first went after a black bag of trash dumped by someone at an intersection was shocking. What the hell is Bob doing? Oh, I can't. A fresh out of the police academy named Danny clenched his eyes. Then and poked, turned away, and spewed onto the pavement. Recent skewering, donuts, and coffee. I'll call for backup. And detectives. Who else do you call, Bob? From the grisly discovery, Danny asked confusedly, "It's time for the medics. It's time. The paramedics aren't going to be much help around here." Bob ran his hand over his forehead and looked away from the find. Into the car, Bob looked pityingly at the boy, whom still in the morning aphasia from the heart for sluggishness and inexperience. But now he sincerely felt sorry for the boy for getting into such a mess on the first day. "Tell them to send Detective Willis," Bob added. "Tell him the Scarlet Judge is back." I said, "No, Your Honor." I repeated it over and over until he... Christina sighed convulsively, and her hands decently, folded in her lap, covered by a classic Slavic shade skirt, tightened for the umpteenth time, leaving red from the bottoms and nail beards on her palms. I was unequivocally expressing my disagreement. "Your Honor." She corrected herself, following a prearranged line with her attorney. Her own brain didn't seem to be on her side, planting ugly thoughts. What do you have to be ashamed of? Stupid. When the worst thing that could happen has already happened to you, don't you realize it's all your own fault? That's what happens to stupid girls who misbehave and don't realize the consequences of being careless with a man. The court session, despite all the efforts of the accused party, was open and journalists and some other people were present. Christina was ready to go crazy, just not to get into even more. Details of what was happening filled the hall. True, there were fewer journalists now, far fewer than in the previous two other hearings. It seemed that they just didn't come because they had something else and more important to do. Christina right now, after having sworn to tell the truth and only the truth, sat there desperately wishing to fall under the ground into the middle of nowhere. Yes, to be a demon to everyone, just to stop this torture of reliving the events of that night over and over again. Savoring their lawyer's Rick details, which he all unwound, like on the youth after the harvest unwind the chain to knock out every single grain from the ears. Here, too, the lawyer in the designer suit made no secret of the fact that he intended to pull out everything he could to show and prove who the bad, dirty girl was here who dared to accuse one nice, white, and fluffy guy. According to my client's version of events, he bought you dinner that night at which you were served champagne. That's true. Yes, nodded Christina. But here's something else that's interesting. The lawyer smirked, sending a glance to the judge. According to the stories of your classmates, dorm mates, you do not drink alcohol. Let me ask you, what made you change your healthy lifestyle that night? Maybe the fact that the bottle of champagne my client ordered cost $1,000. Your Honor, I object. Jane Pierce, the lawyer and attorney representing Christina, darted from her seat. That's a prohibited technique. Your Honor, He's trying to find some ulterior motive in my client's behavior. From what, Ms. Spears? Stuart Dorn grinned. I'm just interested in the details. The foreplay, so to speak. But yes, I do wonder exactly how Smith planned to end the evening. What did she have in mind when she agreed to go to my client's house after dinner? Tell me, my dear, did he promise to show you his stamp collection, or maybe some kittens? The objection is accepted languidly, the judge said, and, unashamedly, yawned. He kept glancing at his watch. Another session was dragging on, but after another half an hour, it could be announced that the case was adjourned. The judge would have lunch with his golf buddies and then dinner with his wife. And he didn't like this case at all, because Judge Jones hated being pressured. And in this case, he was being pressured. Oh, a lot of pressure. Jones chuckled and sent a look to Jane Pierce. And that look seemed to say, don't think I'm making this objection, dearie, because I think you and your client are worth something. It's just that I'm used to doing business the right way right now. The law and my personal beliefs tell me that an objection is appropriate. That's all it is. Judge Jones grimaced. He'd eaten a greasy hot dog for lunch, and now he was suffering from pancreatitis. Also tormented by prostatitis and the thought of that new watch, a gift from an acquaintance for whom the debt was being entered. Probably not a Swiss luxury brand, but a cheap knockoff. So the presence before Jane Pierce's eyes of this upstart from a poor neighborhood, who graduated with honors from an Ivy League university and fancied herself a defender of the wretched and dispossessed, did not improve his mood in any way. Jane sent a reassuring look to her client. Say, hang in there, we'll get through this. But Christina did not notice it. The girl again went into herself from the mountains, beating, as if striving to curl up in a ball, to become as little noticeable as possible. And generally such behavior was shameful to be the victim of a nightmarish crime against the inviolability of a woman's body. Her guilt, her desperate desire to hide from curious patterns and the like. All of this could theoretically have been the right strategy for her client. But Jane was adamantly opposed to this approach, exposing the victim of an intimate crime precisely as a victim, and shaming her. Christina Smith was a different kind of victim, a man whose freedom to dispose of his own body had been encroached upon. But he held his head high and was ready to fight for justice. With a sigh, Jane approached her. As the duty question, which, however, in this situation simply could not be answered in the affirmative. Thank you. I'm fine. Christina turned up her nose and pretended to believe it. The creep will get what he deserves, I promise, Jane said, and smiled cheerfully. There's not much left. The jury is on your side. Christina opened her mouth. She was about to say that she was no longer at all sure that she was not mistaken to be here in the courtroom. She was about to say that she didn't have the strength anymore, but the door to the courtroom suddenly swung open, and in walked the person she least expected to see here. It had all happened about 3 months ago, and at first it didn't seem like a woman's oldest nightmare at all. Christina Smith came here to the United States, Texas, almost 4 years ago, and at that time it seemed to her that she had drawn a lucky and golden ticket of fate. After all, she managed to get a grant to study at a world-renowned university. Could a simple girl dream about it, who a few years ago spent every free moment looking outside the fence of the orphanage and thinking not childishly serious about what awaited her there in the future? Christina had envied all her young little life the children who had been in the orphanage at an age when they simply could not physically remember their family life. She was unlucky. She had been in the orphanage since she was 5 years old. Other kids could dream that one day they would be taken away and have a happy, cozy home, loving mom and dad. Not life, but a holiday where there is a lot of laughter, care, love, comfort, toys, sweets, and fun. Christina could never imagine such a thing. She even seemed a little defective to herself for not being able to picture such marvelous images in her head. Christina was just too painfully aware of what family was like. The stench of overdrinking, with which a small child is sure to get dizzy with cold, clammy, horror, clinging, and little snare body. when mom and dad start fighting among themselves, because it is a sure sign that soon they will start to take out their anger on her caught, as they say, under the hot hand. One day, when Christina was about 12 years old, one of the other orphanage girls, having listened to her story, told her, "That's because you lived in a dying village where there is no work. That's why your parents went downhill. That's why they drank. You shouldn't be angry with them. It's better to forgive and love them, because they're still mom and dad. They gave you life." Christina objected to that girl calling her selfish, a callous, heartless person who, out of spite, and apparently deserved everything that happened to him afterward. "I hate it," screamed Christina in hysterics then. And she and that girl squealed and clawed at each other's hair and clothes, rolling around on the gray earth. "Don't you dare say that. I hate them, and I hate you, and I hate my life." The quarrel and the fight happened because Christina was really in that time of childhood full of death, suffering, pain. She didn't understand how the people who were dear to her in the world could betray her, and she didn't believe the excuses because she knew there were other things that happened. And even in the most terrible conditions, people can remain human. She had read about it in books. It was in some cartoons and movies. Some of the boys had talked about it. Like Charles, a boy 2 years younger than Christina. Christina had only been in the orphanage for a while. He just had a mom and dad die in a car accident. And grandma was pretty sick at the time. She was living with acquaintances, fighting for an apartment that was going to be taken away by crooks, black realtors, and couldn't meet all the strict criteria to be a guardian. But Charles wasn't discouraged. He said his grandmother would take him soon because she loved him so much. Charles was a talkative boy and liked to talk about his life before the orphanage. His family was very poor. They were always having problems, but they loved each other and never hurt him. Then Charles actually left the orphanage with his grandmother. And Christina, as she waved goodbye to him, felt as if a piece of her heart had been torn out of her heart and flew away with Charles. And Christina understood. It would be easier for her if she had dead ones. But good parents than alive but bad ones like that. Coming out of the orphanage at 18, Christina couldn't get the apartment that many orphans were entitled to because she purely technically had a place to live. The very house in the village where her parents still lived. Not a single word from them over the years, by the way. Christina had no intention of visiting them. They were dead to her. "I'll just have to rely on myself. So it's my fate to be alone," she said. One day, people decided to talk to her about life on the eve of graduation. "Oh, you poor thing," shook your head. "Vanessa, the heart is a living thing. No, a man shouldn't be alone. And you, Christina, are a good girl. I'm sure one day you'll meet someone who will make you happy." Christina, then Vanessa's pupil, didn't believe it one bit, but she asked for her phone number and address where she could send letters, and said that one day, if she became happy, she would let her know. And then it was the beginning of adulthood. Even before graduation, Christina thoroughly prepared, chose what university to enter. She was looking for a job competition for a budget place. Christina didn't just pass, she flew through. And then so diligently studied diligently that she was put as an example to other students. Time flew. His Christina fully devoted to study. And she was engaged not only in the university program, but also actively attended language courses, as well as courses in first aid to animals. Naturally, the lonely young girl, deprived at the start of life, close and true friends, also needed something to live on. And Christina worked part-time as a waitress promoter, selling popcorn in a movie theater. She worked as a zookeeper at the zoo one summer and spent the next as Flores. Christina used to live frugally, clothes bought on sale, and even in the salon hand. Cosmetics almost never used, and went to the beauty salon only for a good haircut. She was happy with everything, and even almost lucky. Over the years, student dorm roommates were quite normal girls. Christina was about to graduate, but she decided that this was not enough for her, and she wanted to do something incredibly important and grandiose in this life. And that means thinking about protecting the environment on an international scale. So Christina started looking for a university and a grant to continue her studies in the penultimate year of her native first university. In general, her life was in its own way beating key, but there was no room for any romantic love relationships. This arrangement, of course, could not at all hide from the neighbors in the dormitory, and sometimes they wondered why Christina all alone. She answered simply that she first wants to think about work, about career, and love. Family and marriage will wait. The 20th century is here, Christina said, smiling. Today you can go out at 40 and give birth to your first child. Yes, Christina easily talked about it, but she did not admit to anyone that in addition to sober calculation, she is guided by a chilling fear of paralyzing fear that the man she ventures to love one day will hurt, betray. Christina was afraid of losing out on a relationship and creating a failing family. She just couldn't fathom how it would be possible to meet a man, love him with all her heart, get married, have children, and then suddenly be alone. No, not that. It seemed to Christina that she simply could not stand it, and then would not forgive herself for condemning her child to an incomplete family, in which instead of a father, a gloomy ghost that left behind bitter memories. And so, having denied any hopes for a personal life in the near future, Christina devoted herself to her studies. As a result, she received a positive answer from one university and realized that now she had to go to America. Lucky, one of her roommates told her, and a girl named Nancy, who had already become a friend. You'll meet a millionaire there, and you'll be like a cheese in butter. What a silly thing to say, Christina rolled her eyes. I don't want a millionaire. I mean squinted. Nancy, if you meet him, he'll have to go bankrupt to be with you. The girls laughed, and Christina explained that no, of course not. It's just that for her, a man's wealth is clearly not something worth choosing him as a husband for. On the eve of her flight, Christina texted Vanessa. They kept in touch a little bit, shared news from life, and briefly congratulated each other on holidays. Oh, the backwoods is stirring, Vanessa. What's America to you? Who needs you there? And if anything were to happen, what to do? You'll be alone in a foreign land. Sveta. Vanessa laughed. Christina, you make it sound like I'm going to Mars. Everything will be all right. People live in America too. I won't be lost. A diploma from one of the best foreign universities promised to open many doors before Christina, and she was already timidly ashamed of her ambitions, impudent, but dreamed of how one day will deal with the global problems of disappearing corals in their reefs, greenhouse gas emissions into the Earth's atmosphere, deforestation, the Amazon, the encroaching desert, sugar, the extinction of species in Indonesia. Christina nearly gasped with trembling excitement as she realized she was a mere orphanage girl. A girl could one day do so much good for the world. Help keep the planet healthy, diverse and beautiful for future generations. And then there was the hustle and bustle, buying airline tickets, stowing things in their luggage despite living in a dorm, and then a few more months in a rented apartment. It was a lot. And part of Christina just left, gave away to neighbors, and as a gift, having given an announcement on the internet. And then it was a flight to the United States, and only after stepping on the land of this country, Christina really realized how abruptly she changed her life. She even felt a little scared. But then she gave herself an imaginary little slap in the face. It's too late to be sad. Oh, honey, there's no turning back. You've already done it, and you've made up your mind. So now it's just forward. And Christina began to live in America, slowly realizing herself in the language environment. It turned out that it was not easy to communicate with Americans who spoke with hundreds of accents and local speech peculiarities. The scholarship from the university allowed a lot, but as in the previous place, it was not enough, and Christina got a job working in shifts in 2 places at once, in a store selling Chinese noodles, as well as a waitress in roadside eateries, where mostly truckers migrated. These guys rarely left tips, but the owner was patient with the fickle schedule of the student. And also here, the staff could have a tasty, hearty snack with the same thing that was served to guests. So, in fact, the savings on food were worth adding to the salary. Christina studied hard again. She got her own desk in the reading room of the university library. She joined several student clubs, the Goldfish Lovers Flower Club, and a club whose members were hands and feet in favor of sensible consumption of things, which ranged from replacing plastic bags with fabrics in her bag to not buying an extra pair of shoes, because the existing ones were enough. The months flew by. Life as a student, Christina now felt as if it had gone in a second circle. And just like before, she had no personal life. The reason was still the same fear that serious relationships and love could turn out to be just an illusion. Doesn't every guy you date have to be married? Do you have to marry every guy you meet? She asked and winked. Christina's dorm roommate. Why don't you just have fun? You have a lot to lose. Christina had no choice but to stand her ground and spread her hands. No, she wasn't a prude and could understand other girls, and guys who wanted to savor the pleasures of youth. And sometimes Christina thought that maybe it would be nice to go on dates, to try relationships with new people, to experience storms of emotions, to live in love today without far-reaching plans. But then she realized it might be good for others, but not for her. So it was better to stop thinking about it and get on with what she had come here to do, which was studying. And then Christina's world turned upside down, changed and shattered, as if by the eruption of Vesuvius or a meteorite fall in the age of the dinosaurs. Her world changed nightmarishly a few months before her final exams, and it all started when I talked her into going to a club. Christina didn't like going to clubs, but now she made an exception for the sake of her friend. The thing was that P had gone through a painful breakup with her boyfriend and was going to, as she said, go on a break before transferring to another university in the state of Kansas. But breaking up with her boyfriend and transferring had nothing to do with it. Justin Tales scored so high that admission to the final exams was out of the question. I decided to try my luck with education elsewhere. And here she said that it's boring to have fun alone, and then you need a reliable person around. If my friends won't look after me. Shook an index finger in front of Christina's nose. Then I'll start molesting the waiters. I'll dance on the table, steal the DJ's record, and do a lot of other things. And I'll end up getting picked up by the police. I was helping you study for the exam, Christina. So you gave me mine to marry. What was I supposed to do? I had to agree, especially since lately it had to be against the background of intensive studies. Christina felt broken and scattered, so she decided it might make sense to change her rules and go to the club for once. Besides her, B's cheerleading squad consisted of a few other girls, Stacy, Molly, Jessica, and Sabrina, and the night was off to a great start. We laughed, drank colorful cocktails, and lacquered chocolate-covered strawberries, spinning on the dance floor. Back off, Jessica said, when some guy who looked like a rapper tried to grab Christina in a hug. Our friend's not dating tonight. She never does, and she is waiting for a prince, exclaimed Sabrina, who was, by the way, much more free and right now was dancing with two guys, because she managed to grab a cute pair of red-headed twins. Her friends looked at her with envy and encouraged her with loud cheers. She's expecting a prince, but I'll bet she's not. She'll end up marrying some farmer and becoming a good housewife. Trade saving the world for a house, a green lawn, and a white picket fence with my family dog. Annual entry in the pie contest at the local fair is melancholy, Stacy added. Fuck, girls, just leave her alone. Molly grabbed Katie by the shoulders for a friendly smack well her nose. She's a sweetheart. Innocent little girl. My grandmother would want a granddaughter like that. And any guy would be happy to marry an innocent, modest, straightest student and a real lady. The evening flowed smoothly into the night, and gradually Christina began to realize that she liked the loud music, the flashing lights. All this somehow simultaneously tiresome, made her nervous, and at the same time pulled out of the daily routine, when every day was like the day before. The girls showed up in front of N's friends. You won't believe it. She ran off 5 minutes ago, and everyone wondered where she'd gone. I've met so many guys, and kept counting. They're inviting us over. Really? Jessica said hesitantly. Why didn't they come themselves? I told them not to bother us, and we come ourselves. And if we want to. It's important, Anne said. And we want to. Opinions were divided. Sabrina had finally chosen one of the twins and was going to leave the club with him. Stacy expressed that they had already walked enough and it was time to go back to campus. Molly supported Stacy. Jessica said that she would generally dance until morning and wasn't interested in anything else. I have a bad feeling about this, Molly said. Don't go. She looked at Christina carefully. Oh, don't start socializing. Rolled her eyes. Just because your great-grandmother performed soothsayer, not you traveling circus, doesn't make you Cassandra. These are the good guys. They gave me a few names. Clarified what families these young guys came from. All clear, nodded Molly Majors. Golden boys. That's not me. Give it to them. As you Russians have a saying. Christina, about the hand and teeth. Give a finger, and they will bite off the whole hand. The girl clarified. She had her doubts. Not that she had a bad feeling, but she saw that the crowded Bright Club was not a hole in the suburbs, but a decent establishment, which means that bad things could happen to her and her friend here. So she said goodbye to the girls and joined Kay. Mentioned guys Majors were waiting for the girls in the VIP box. 3 men. Christina held herself tense at first, but then relaxed. They turned out to be very nice guys. They didn't do too much, and they weren't even too drunk. They just wanted to have a good time. And now, they were just fascinated by cute girls. A few more hours flew by unnoticed. The clock on Christina's smartphone read 4 o'clock, and she began to hint that it was time for them to leave. By this time, there was only one guy left from the mail company. His name was Rick, and his friends had left earlier. You're not going to walk the streets alone at night, are you? He raised his eyebrows, and I might let you down. It would be great, rejoiced, and Christina was skeptical and wary. After all, everyone knows that with strangers should not go anywhere and never. But on the other hand, thought Christina, if so afraid of everything in the world. Said this guy is the son of a big man. His father's a prosecutor. So is it conceivable that Alex could turn out to be some kind of maniac? Christina thought the chances of that were minimal, which meant she was very tired, falling off her feet, so she said yes. Rick turned out to be a careful driver, didn't take things lightly, and kept the speed the slowest. Asked him every minute if his passengers were feeling nauseous. Maybe pull over. We got to talking on the road, and suddenly, it turned out that Alex's father was the prosecutor in several high-profile cases related to the problem of environmental pollution by industrial enterprises. Word by word, they found out what Christina plans to become in the future. Alex said that her choice was very noble and added that if she only wanted, he could help her with her thesis. Christina decided to dedicate it to the problem of decreasing deer population in the local suburban forests. The suggestion came after getting out of the car with a 4th gate and heading toward the women's dormitory building. Thank you, Christina smiled shyly. It's just that my old man's on a case with you recently. Alex winked at her. There and about the pollution of the river with emissions from the paint factory and poaching. In general, there is a place to go if you know how to work with facts. There's information that you don't just find out. But he took her hand, as if it was an innocent gesture. But Christina suddenly on the back of Frost and Murakami struck. You. I can give you access to her. Everything will be revealed later. But about 6 months from now, at the last stage of the process, imagine how cool your diploma will be if it contains the latest information, which is not even in all the consecutive journalists. What do you think? Christina hesitated. The offer sounded very tempting, especially if you work with the information carefully, so as not to violate the laws on the protection of trade secrets and the like. Christina bit her lip nervously. It seemed to her that something very important was being decided now, that what she chose now would affect her life in the future. "All right," she finally answered. "I agree." Rick said that this whole conversation was not for cafes and other public spaces, which meant she'd better come to his place. But first, why not celebrate all this with dinner at a restaurant? She said, "Are you a brat?" Alex grinned. "Don't worry, it's not a date. You're not my type enough for me to want to date you. But I don't agree to lose a great evening by spending it with boring arguments about the nature of good and evil. So here's my proposal. We have dinner at a nice place, chat about anything you want to know, and then we go to my place, and you dig through the papers as much as you want. Would your father mind?" asked Christina, who only now realized that in Alex's interesting and strange at the same time proposals, there was a hint of something not quite legal. "Isn't all this information confidential?" "He certainly has some," Alex answered, "but I'm not that generous, and I don't like you that much. No, I'm not suggesting you get involved in the DA's business, that you are so just general information, not exactly secret, but priceless. But in general, my old man doesn't mind you learning a little bit about all this." "Really?" I wondered. "He's one of my good guys," Alex grinned. "It's just that he's working really hard on this case. The experts report, questioning the locals and all that, you know. He said as long as you don't dump that information before the trial goes through, he's fine with it." Now Christina was just thrilled. She thanked Alex warmly and said that she would like to talk to his father some more then. "Well, maybe later," the man said, and somehow got a little gloomy. "You see, my old man is very busy with all this prosecutor stuff. He's got his days packed to the minute. Maybe sometime later. But for now." "What? What do you want?" "Not enough of what I'm offering." Christina had a lot to offer, and she finally said yes. It was agreed that Alex would pick her up next Friday and then the next few days. Christina mentally returned to their conversation more than once and thought about how bizarre human fate could be. It turned out that Rick was not 100% American. His grandparents moved to the U.S. from the Soviet Union in the 1970s. They had a son, Sebastian, who later became a federal prosecutor and father. Christina said nothing to her friend about her plans to meet Rick. She decided that it would be better. It would be such a cool surprise, as she managed to write an excellent diploma, which really can be proud. And so on Friday night, she was ready. And although it was not a date, Christina decided that it would be more appropriate to wear not jeans, became a stack, that is, her favorite clothes, and a little black dress. It was bought at another sale on insistently Mossad. Yes, so and hung idle, and even still with all the store's squirrels. Loafer shoes, black stockings, a little mascara, lip gloss, and a drop of perfume. Alex picked her up as agreed at 8 o'clock, and while his red sports car raced through the evening city, they talked about nothing. And then there was a cozy restaurant with velvet curtains, live music, and exorbitant prices. Christina was indignant at the menu. But Alex, waving his hand, said that for him it was just trifles. "And let's not talk about business." The guy rolled his eyes. "My father always talks about business at the table. That's why he got gastritis." Christina agreed, and again, they talked about nothing. Alex joked a lot, including vulgar jokes, and poured more champagne into his and her glass. Christina, however, refused, but he insisted, saying that if she didn't drink, she would definitely spoil his evening. By the time dessert was served, Christina, this evening didn't seem so pleasant anymore. But then again, don't be an imaginative fool, she told herself. What could you possibly face in the house of a man like a federal prosecutor? And so, when Alex opened the door of the mansion in front of her, she crossed its threshold, ignoring the rotten flower blooming somewhere in her stomach, a very, very bad feeling. The dawn of a new day found Jane Pierce jogging in the city park. Her chest was filled with fresh and cool air, and a frequent but measured breath escaped her lips. Streaks of steam, and her muscles felt pleasantly washed, as they always did at the beginning of a workout. If you'd let yourself idle for a whole week before that, lying on a beach in the Caribbean and spoiling yourself beyond measure with brownies. But on the other hand, Jane deliberately allowed herself this weakness. After all, she had finally made partner in the firm to which she had devoted 10 years of her career. Yes, it's a good life, Jane thought, grinning. In the distant past remained a poor childhood in a neighborhood that was insultingly nicknamed the Black Ghetto. Years of austerity are behind her as the oldest, helping her mother raise her 3 younger brothers and 2 sisters. Today, she's a successful attorney with her schedule jam-packed a year in advance. And thanks to her promotion to full partner, she'll also have her own office where she can hang all her diplomas in a frame. So purely for fun and bragging. But Jane was even more pleased today that her successful career had not forced her to give up her free internship. In general, she had been told more than once that she was wasting her highly paid hours on scum, people who were clearly to blame for getting into trouble in the first place. But Jane couldn't help herself, and for more than 8 years now, she has found time to help those in difficult situations, no matter how busy her work schedule. Domestic violence and cases against corporations whose activities literally poison the lives of provincial towns. Racism and medical malpractice, wrongful terminations, and internet bullying. Jane was not afraid to take on the most unconventional and ambiguous, and at first glance, absolutely hopeless cases. But right now, she was dedicating this morning to herself. Just her deserted for 6 o'clock park, flexing rhythm, working at the limit of her heart and music in tiny headphones. Wisps of fog were settling in from the river running through the park. And so Jane didn't see her at once, but ran right up to her, saw her and slowed down. And then her eyes rounded in horror. The girl on the bench was exactly like a stricken bird, hands convulsively hugging herself to her shoulders, knees in drab stockings, tightly clenched. The body shook with a coarse tremor. Face whiter than chalk, red and wet with tears smeared in makeup. Oh no, Jane exhaled. Which brings me to what seems to have happened here. Honey, what's your name? Taking out and tucking her headphones into her show bag, she took a step toward her. Honey, don't be afraid. I'll help you. What's your name? The girl on the bench looked up with piercing blue homeless eyes. They were empty and painful. What happened over the next few weeks merged for Christina into a madhouse of poverty of soul and the fog in which she seemed to wander everything. It was only a sudden outstretched helping hand that gave her hope that she wouldn't stay in it forever. Never before in Christina's life had there been such a person as Jane Pierce. Her attention and care surrounded Christina with a warm, safe cocaine. It was Jane who insisted on going to the police immediately. She did not leave Christina either in the detective's office where the girl threw muffled sobs for which there seemed to be no tears left, nor in the clinic where she underwent the specific examinations necessary to prosecute the case. Jane followed Christina everywhere, what is called tail. And later, looking back, Christina realized that if Jane actively pitied her, tried to console her, somehow to calm her down and convince her that life goes on, and everything will be fine, she would not have been able to stand it. She would have rejected all help, and there is no telling what would have happened then. But Jane Pierce was not like that. She only once expressed sympathy and pity while riding in a cab to the police station. There in Christina's parlor, tucked against her shoulder, Jane gave vent to tears and came out in a voice, and she silently stroked her shoulders and head. Quietly whispered that Christina is a strong girl and she will cope for sure. Then Jane reincarnated into what she was, a brilliant professional for her client. Only a dry, rigorous handling of the facts at hand. Only a business-like practical approach to what had happened. Jane also insisted that Christina move out of the dormitory, moving into a small rental apartment in a decent neighborhood. Christina, by the way, tried to timidly argue that she couldn't afford such a thing because she had quit her job. She just didn't have the energy to go to it anymore. And it was scary to go out of the house into the street at all. And all that was left was to live off his modest savings. But Jane insisted and said she would pay for everything and support her finances. Don't think about money, Jane said then. Right now, you should be thinking about finishing university and living another day. You don't need a big one. Christina was very grateful to her, and only sometimes timidly and fearfully began to talk about how maybe she shouldn't. Maybe it would be better to withdraw her application somehow. This conversation took place on the first evening after moving into the rented apartment. No, Jane shook her head. Such a serious matter couldn't be stopped. And then Jane suddenly took a sharp step towards Christina, literally hovered over her, and putting her hand on her shoulder, looked into her eyes. And now she was looking coldly stern and even evil. You know, if it were about you and only you, and you had said that my services were no longer needed, I might have stopped. But do you have any idea how many more women this bad man can hurt? How many more crimes he could commit if he felt he could get away with it? So it's not just you, it's probably dozens of other people. You can't let them down. Set them up this dirty, you know. So get a grip. You can't just do it. You owe it to yourself to follow through. And you will. Christina felt like she'd do anything. She'd sell her soul. If only this whole process could be handled in some kind of private way. But Rick's lawyer thought otherwise. And immediately after the charges brought against his client launched a powerful campaign aimed at creating in the public a positive image of his client and at the same time to denigrate Christina. And this man was ready to use any tools, any means. He led in the course of even the origin of Christina Children's Home and the daughter of village alcoholics. At the first hearing, he introduced the judge to some studies from the 50s, which said that the children of disadvantaged social elements and themselves turn out to be vicious, prone to lying and all sorts of crimes, among which, of course, may be attempts to dirty deceit, accused of a terrible crime in order to profit. Rick's lawyer insisted that everything was voluntary. And then, when his client refused to take Christina as a permanent mistress, that's when she decided to vilify him. And in a meeting that took place between the two parties before the trial began, Rick's attorney suggested to Jane that her client could receive a generous financial reward for settling the case out of court. He also pressed Christina to sign a contract not to disclose any details of her relationship with Rick. The bad man thinks we can be bought. Indignantly banged her fist on Jane's palm. She was one step away. Nervously paced the only room in Christina's apartment. He thinks $100,000 is enough for your silence. I don't want his money, Christina whispered. I just want to go back so none of this will ever happen. Why can't I live in the dorms? For the umpteenth time, she asked. If only because this house has security. And journalists can't come here. Jane's eyes twinkled. Besides, you have no idea how dirty these types can work. He has no shame in turning everyone against you. Not understanding everyone, asked Christina. I should not now, sighed Jane. She was a professional, but she was also a human being and a woman. And so she couldn't always act with the cold calculation of a robot. I was going to tell you about that. What Christina still didn't understand. Stuart is trying to give you the image of a brainless girl from Russia who came to America to find a rich husband, Jane replied. As far as I know, he has already started to bribe students who will be ready to tell everyone that you slept with them for money. Christina froze. She was simply shocked. Is there no limit in the world to the human cruelty of meanness? Hadn't she suffered enough? Hadn't she been tortured enough to be so filthy now? Disgusting to do to her. It seemed to the girl that the room had run out of air, and she could hardly hear what Jane said next, that this fact would also be taken into account, that she would certainly find evidence of the foul play of Stuart and his client, and then they'll both be in trouble, and both of them will go to jail. With a rap sheet so long, they'll never get parole. I'm sorry, what did you say? Jane asked. Christina did not immediately realize that she had just voiced the thought aloud, which had been swirling around in her head for the last few minutes with the inevitable persistence of a hungry wasp. I want to go back home, she said. I just want this to be over. I don't want any more, I can't. She looked at the lawyers pleadingly. I want to fly out of America. Let it just be over. Okay, stop. Jane sat down beside her, took her hand in her palm, and gently clenched the icy fingers. What are you talking about? It's nice. It'll all be over soon, and you know it very well. The criminal will be punished and all his attempts. You don't understand. I shook my head. Christina, I can't take it anymore. Understand, Jane, it's me. The girl gently put out her hand. I feel like a criminal. I feel that everyone is against me. I can't leave the house. The journalists, they won't even let me go to the supermarket to get milk. I can't pass my exams. I can't get a diploma. That, and I don't need this colorless voice. Christina exhaled. Damn it all to hell. I don't need this stupid university. Okay, I hear you, said Jane. Your condition, it's natural for no. Almost screamed Christina. You don't understand. I can't take it all anymore. I no longer feel that my life belongs to me. Everything has been taken away from me. I no longer feel like myself. What he did was he flailed his arms helplessly as if my heart had been ripped out of my soul or something. I can't explain it, but I think I really should leave, fly back. I've already got 1 degree. I'm gonna go to work. And you believe that in time you can forget to cross that chapter out of your life. Interrupted, continuing for her, Jane. I think you also wanted to say that I don't understand you because it's not me, because the abuse didn't happen to me. And, you're right. It's impossible for anyone to say that he or she understands a woman who's been through an experience like that. It's unique, nightmarishly unique to each case. But you're wrong in devaluing others' attempts to walk beside you down that road as well. I think you yourself are well aware that this happens to a lot of people. 1 billion women around the world, the entire history of mankind. But don't you think it's a bit much, giving them a victory like that? Yes, one day a man can catch, break, and subjugate your body, or even rip a piece out of your soul. That's all true, but is it true that you are willing to give him the rest of your life yourself? Imagine how happy he'd be. What pleasure would he feel if he knew that after all this, betraying your dreams, choosing to be a victim for the rest of your life? That's his ultimate goal. That's what they all want. I can't understand you. I'm sorry, Christina shook her head. What I'm saying, Jane sighed, is that what happened was not about lust, not about infatuation, not about the fact that he wanted a woman and decided to take what he wanted. Yes, monsters like him are willing to cover their actions with anything they want. They say that women provoke them with short skirts, that they tease them, that they shouldn't have agreed to go out and visit, and shouldn't have walked down a dark alley. But you know what the bottom line is. The heart of their acts of power. Violence of this sort is always power and destruction. And the sweetest ending for them is not the one you might think. Jane's lips trembled, and now there were tears in her eyes. The one in which they know their victim will carry their pain, the destruction she left behind through life. It's like she's going to carry their stigma. That's what they all really want. And are you really willing to let him do that? Answer me. You're gonna let him do it? Jane asked with pressure. She continued, I personally really haven't had that experience, but my family has. And Jane spoke. Jane's mother didn't have it easy. Her father had abandoned the family during hard times when the country was hit by another economic crisis. And to take care of his loved ones, he had to work hard. And this man, he didn't want to. Or maybe he didn't know how to work hard. He abdicated his responsibility. So he ran away. Jane's mom would take any job to feed her kids, but it wasn't easy. And then Jane, as the eldest, understood what was happening all too well. Her mother had gotten involved with a nasty type of relative of the landlord where they lived. And this man with a nasty temper wanted a great deal for helping them with money. Jane's mother often explained to the children and also to acquaintances that she had fallen tripped. How clumsy she was. But Jane, who was 14 at the time, understood that in fact the type just likes to beat her mom, and she tolerates, as long as her kids weren't missing. But then one day, mom wasn't home. Jane's siblings were playing in the yard. That day, Cecilia, a distant relative, came to visit them. She was a cheerful, kind 18-year-old doll with skin the color of white wood. She was also from a poor family, but she knew how to generously share the last of her money with those in need. And now she'd come for a reason, bringing a pile of groceries and preparing her grandmother's first pie recipe with chicken and dried fruit. Jane was in the next room, studying for exams. She would have been happy to help, but she was a perfect stretch in the kitchen, so Cecilia put her out. There the door opened. Voices were heard. Jane dully dropped her head alertly to the voice of Frank, her mother's roommate. She recognized him. He'd had a spare set of keys for a long time and would drop in any time without asking, often drunk. But who had come with him? From the kitchen came Cecilia's shout. Jane sprang from the room, and, before her eyes like a scarlet veil, everything became clouded when she saw the unfamiliar type, grabbing omnipotence piled on, and seemed to be trying to strangle chuckling. The bread came from a bottle of beer. So Hank, show the little shit how to obey her elders. Jane screamed with rage and lashed out at her friend. It was the frying pan test story all over again. She fought desperately and soon gave out, occupying in her hands tears on her dress. Cecilia hid behind her shoulder. Get out of here. Jane swung at the men. For meat, her mother's roommate and his boyfriend laughed no more, and they barreled away muttering curses under their noses. It's okay. Jane turned to Cecilia and hugged her tightly. It's all right. He won't hurt you again. But she was wrong. 2 days later, the police found Cecilia's body with signs of abuse. They said she had been dragged into a car and then thrown off a bridge into the river after all. The police said they were unlikely to find who did it. It was Frank. He did it. Jane blamed the man who was to her the most obvious and only suspect. But her mom didn't believe her and even slapped her daughter across the face for the first time. Ordered her to shut up and not talk nonsense. Later, Jane realized her mother was afraid of her roommate and his buddy, but she also seemed to be seriously afraid for her children, and soon broke up with the man. And Frank Jane, more than once, as she walked down their street, met him and caught his triumphant mocking glances, and how she wished she could claw at his throat and send him from the same place from which they had thrown the poor, pure nobody to harm Cecilia, who had done no harm and deserved no such fate. And then it happened. The Scarlet Judge came for Frank. It had been the talk of the town and the state for years. Journalists had been savoring the details, and the public had been hungry for them. And the judge was no ordinary run-of-the-mill maniac. Oh no, he was someone who was very selective. His victims were always men who were accused of abuse. Sometimes the judge catches up with those who've just been tried. Sometimes those who got out of prison as if they had atoned for their sins to the victim and to society. And sometimes he's gotten to people who haven't even been tried. Who's the word on the street? And this man, he's definitely a danger to the female gender. The FBI was on the ground. The judge's MO was characteristically specific. One look at his victims, and it imprinted itself on the brain. He was a monster, but there were many who understood him and even approved of his actions. After all, he did not hunt innocent victims, but those who deserved punishment, even if the law thought he was not as much of a Kara. When Jane found out what had happened to Frank, she jumped for joy. She screamed and 300. Then she stayed awake, tormented, building up to the thought that justice, it turns out, is out there in the world. The world played for Jane new colors, and now on the streets she greedily gazed into the faces of passers-by, wondering who of them could be this hero. Yes, Jane didn't think the Scarlet Judge was a criminal. He was just doing what he had to do. He was handing out what he deserved to those who couldn't be dealt with. The authorities were cruel, nightmarish. But Jane couldn't shake off the thought that she would serve the small judge herself, his sharply sharpened implements, if she had the honor of helping avenge the violence. And then the legend ended. The FBI arrested one man and charged him with being the judge. He turned out to be a regular suburban milk delivery guy. The police said they found all the evidence at his house, but the high-profile trial never happened. The accused died of a heart attack before the investigation was even completed. Jane, who was 18 years old by then, was in so much pain as if she had lost a good friend of her own. She saw it as disgusting proof of the unfair structure of the world around her, but life went on. Jane, it was time to make her choice, to find her way in life, and then she became one. She became a lawyer, dedicated herself to the service of law and justice. All these shadows and pictures of the past flashed through Jane's mind as she told Christina her story. However, she left out a number of details in it. She did not say that she had supported the Scarlet Judge's deeds back then, because it was unethical and wrong to talk about such a thing at all. Jane had long ago found out well how important it is to delineate her life into two parts: what is available to the world and that which belongs to her alone. That's how Jane ended it. Each of us will have a story that has a place for pain, but we are all still alone. And Christina felt strange. For the first time since that night, it was as if she suddenly saw herself from the outside. I felt something amazing in her whole being, like a calmness was breaking. It was the calm after the storm, when you see and palpably fracture with your body all the destruction it brought. But at the same time, you realize the storm has passed, and now it's up to you to decide what you're going to be like next, and your world. No, Christina exhaled. I'm not gonna let him do this. I'm staying. Good girl. Jane smiled with the swagger of a bastard. Now how about we order pizza to Hade's calories? I think we deserve a tasty snack with you. And then we get to work. You got a deal. I got some ideas on how to run this thing to trap them. Jane said this meeting won't be the last, but the next one will probably be the end of it. She said Rick's defense was running out of good cards, and soon they'd be cornered. Christina didn't think or say anything like that. It seemed to her that she had no opinion of her own. She had only enough strength to live another day and to follow the path Jane had set for her. And so now, as if in a dream, she looked at the man who had entered the hall, confused and uncomprehending. She recognized him. It was Rick Sebastian's father. She had seen him at the mansion that terrible night, or rather, a photographic portrait of him, huge black and white framed and subdued in silver. It hung before her eyes, and all the while Rick was breaking her soul, tearing her heart apart, and for his word of passion taunting her body. Rick, by the way, before he threw her out of the mansion, laughingly told her that no, he wasn't going to give her any important material suitable for writing her diploma. And no, his father doesn't know anything about her at all. And he certainly wouldn't share important information with some obscure girl. There goes Jane. What is he doing here? The question was logical, because earlier, according to Jane, it appeared that Mr. throughout the trial of his son had refrained from talking to the press, did not give any comments, and in general, it seemed as if he had evaporated. But now he was here, a powerful prosecutor, famous for a string of high-profile cases against corrupt officials, police officers, National Park Service employees, border guards, and more. He was planning to retire due to early retirement, but plans to take a well-deserved vacation didn't mean the man was retiring altogether. He lectured at universities. He participated in seminars for representatives of power structures. He wrote several books at the same time. All this Jane told Christina, though she did not want to listen. She was sick of knowing anything about him at all, because it reminded her of the events of that evening. But Jane had insisted, saying that it was important to know as much as possible about this man, because both of them had no idea from the beginning of the trial what his reaction to all this might be. And judging by the fact that he showed up at the hearing so suddenly, without any proper notice, it promised to be a very violent reaction anyway. Sir, Rick's lawyer broke out in a truly cigarette-butt smile and opened his arms, stepped forward to meet an unexpectedly new face in the proceedings. Let me say this, Sebastian didn't even look at him, walked past him. shoving him away with his shoulder. He was heading toward his son, and he stood up and suddenly began to stalk away. A mixture of horror and amazement froze on the young man's face. "Dad, shut up," Sebastian bellowed. And the next moment his fist smashed into the boy's nose with a powerful crunch. "What do you think you're doing?" screamed, jumping up from his seat. "Stop that guard at once. What are you standing there for?" Couple of guards, tough guys with clubs. And not only did they look at each other, but they didn't move. They just knew who was here. They had worked here a long time and had seen Sebastian more than once in the corridors and courtrooms, and had no desire to get under the man's hot hand now. "Don't you dare shut up. I should feed you to the sharks." Sebastian grabbed the man by the scruff of his neck and pulled him to him and threw another punch, this time in the ear, and then squeamishly pushed him away from him like that. So the guy went flying across a couple chairs and howled in pain, collapsed to the floor. By what right? The judge started in, but Sebastian glared at him so hard that he could do it immediately. "You may consider that I came and took the word to which I, as his father and a federal prosecutor, might have had a right," Sebastian muttered. "Mr. Jones, you are dismissed from this case and are no longer performing your duties," he said, leaving his index finger on him. "Sebastian, I should have dealt with you sooner, but now Arnold's gonna finish the job." That judge is rounding my eyes. Arnold Gray got an arrest warrant, and he got a nasty smile. "Sebastian, you're charging him. However, I'll leave it to you to read the list of charges to him. But you will no longer conduct business as you used to with bribes and biased personal attitudes toward the defendants." "Ouch," Jones said, grabbing his heart and sliding down, because the name of the man who had previously been Sebastian's deputy and was now preparing to succeed him as federal prosecutor was familiar to him. More recently, Jones had fought desperately to keep Arnold Gay, too honest, too incorruptible, and too fond of the truth, from getting his position. But he had almost gotten his job. And so he began to act ruthlessly. "You are not well with court sympathy?" Sebastian inquired. "Don't worry, we have an excellent doctor in our federal prison. Where's Gray?" he added, looking at his wristwatch. "He's running late." No. There he was," Sebastian said with his last words, greeting the people who came through the open door. We could see a man in a strict gray suit and several policemen. The latter briskly, disregarding the cries of protest and sluggish chatter, read former Judge Jones his rights and handcuffed him. "We're replacing the judge," said Jane Christina, who could barely understand what was going on. "That's good." The lawyer smiled. "I didn't like that Jones guy at all." "No, you saw him." His Jane turned to Christina, pointing a finger in the direction of Rick, who, sitting on the floor with a gorgeous nose. Christina felt strange, as if she had gotten to the movie show late. And now, despite the fact that it was vividly explained to her what had time to show before her arrival, she could not understand what was happening. So Christina asked, in your voice, "Are there going to be more hearings?" "I can't." No. She wanted to say she'd had enough. That life had promised her it would all be over soon. But, Jane Pierce, I believe Sebastian approached them. "Your client, Ms. Smith." "Right." He turned to Christina. "I'd say it's a pleasure to meet you, but the circumstances, I'm afraid, are not appropriate." "You did the right thing, sir," Jane addressed him. "I know." She waved her head. "I'm not supposed to say that as a lawyer. And besides, this is your son we're talking about." "But yes, Rick is my son, and he still is, no matter what," Sebastian said thoughtfully. "I've heard a lot about you, and Spears speaks favorably of you in many different circles. That we are a son." Sebastian looked at Alex for a moment. This came as a shock to me. I certainly made mistakes in his upbringing, but I didn't think that my son would turn out to be a criminal. However, I think you'd better hear it from me. The trial will have to be postponed indefinitely. That Christina felt as if she were about to faint. What would she ask in the tone of an uncomprehending Jane? "What I am about to tell you is strictly confidential. and must remain between us. Sebastian's voice sounded cold and steel shone in his gaze. I am currently working on placing my son in a federal program to protect potential victims of particularly dangerous criminals, which would require him to, shall we say, disappear indefinitely. Sir, Jane sighed convulsively. I'm afraid I don't understand. And your son can't disappear anywhere. He must answer. Believe me, the last thing I'm in the mood for right now is obstruction of justice, Sebastian said. But I don't intend to allow lawlessness. My son appears to be the new target of the small judge. He has received a message from him. Christina frowned. She still didn't understand much of what was going on. Everything in her head was a mess, but some things were starting to become clear. Alan is a judge, but of course, Jane had mentioned him the other day in a story about her past. Are you a judge? Careful. Christina asked. It's a maniac. Quite right, Sebastian nodded. A hunter and doomsayers, as he called himself. But he's dead, isn't he? He was. Sebastian's lips hid nervously. Many years of silence, and then, this information is not to be found in the press. Again, it's strictly confidential. But in the last 2 years, there have been several massacres and all victims. And the judge is dead. That's for sure. But he's got a copycat. And he sent my son a warning. That's why Alex needs to disappear. He needs to stay safe until this guy is caught. And after that, Sebastian looked me straight in the eye. Christina, believe me, from Smith, I am personally making sure that after this, your trial will be resumed as soon as possible. And I swear, as a father who cares about his son, that I will not prevent his just punishment under the laws of America and the state of Texas. But I will not allow him to be turned into rat food simply because one self-proclaimed vigilant decides so. With that, Sebastian left the courtroom with his son and Bourne's attorney. Jane quietly muttered to herself again. Christina stood in prostration and felt completely devastated. Already at the very doors, Rick turned around. His face was smudged red. He was clearly terrified. But he still sent both women a triumphant smirk of superiority as if to tell them, rejoice early. As you can see, nothing ended in victory for you today. Don't worry, he can't escape retribution, commented Jane's facial expression. Christina did not remember how she got home, only that she was driven by Jane, as always. And there the girl collapsed, not even afraid, on the couch, and closed her eyes and fell into a semblance of heavy sleep. When she opened her eyes, a hazy light was shining outside the windows, and she thought she must have slept through the evening, but it turned out to be until the next morning. Rising, she quietly composed her whole body over the glass from that couch. Her mouth felt dry, and there was a nasty taste in her mouth. Her stomach was vaulting with nausea. Probably, Christina thought, it's because I skipped lunch and dinner yesterday. Once again, quietly at the table, the girl went into the tiny kitchen, typical for this kind of cheap accommodation. There wasn't even the usual normal stove here, just a microwave. She looked in the refrigerator. Macaroni and cheese, turkey ham. Her stomach twisted even worse, and Christina rushed to the bathroom. Then spent a long time running ice water in her face. How bad is it? And in the fever throes, as if sick. Back in the room, the girl plumped on the couch, lazily poked at the answering machine, and found there predictably a bunch of messages, mostly from acquaintances from the university. Yes, there were quite a few good guys there who were supportive in her nightmare situation. Christina was deeply grateful to them, but communicating with them was beyond her. The last communication was from the clinic. It was where Christina had been evaluated after what had happened, and it was also where her insurance had provided her with specific treatment measures after this nightmare. And now Dr. Roger Stone had left a message saying they needed to talk urgently. Mastery. After a minute, Christina said, "I'm sorry, but I can't make it. I think I'm sick. What did you want to talk about?" Roger replied that it was about the latest tests they had taken from him about a week ago. It was a standard procedure to confirm that the girl's body was recovering normally from the abuse, that she hadn't contracted any infections. "Your tests showed something unusual," Roger said cautiously. "I insist that you come to the clinic for further tests as soon as possible." Clamping down well on the headache, the former whiskey-toothed. "And the dots," answered Christina. "I'll be right there. Call a cab, just survive the ride in it without getting dirty." It's harder to get into a salon. Christina ate 2 packages of meat candy for nausea, but it wasn't helping much. Dr. Stone, who met her at the clinic, began asking 1,000 questions about her well-being, many of which struck her as very strange. But Christina didn't ask questions, she just answered. She felt so broken and just wanted to go home quickly. When she went outside the clinic, the sun was shining and the birds were singing. After the rain had just ended, she looked out to the sea, moose to the clear sky. She wanted to ask the universe only one question: why? Why did her life have to turn out this way? Once Christina was curious about the theory that nothing in life happens for nothing, that fate sends people life lessons and tests, that they themselves attract certain events and get exactly what they were ready for. But now she would have her nails in the face of anyone who dared to say that to her, because it was simply unthinkable that what happened to her was some kind of lesson or she deserved it. In what interesting way? Sucking in air convulsively. Christina, careful, as if there might be a bite back there, put a hand to her stomach. Dr. Stone said that, unfortunately, even the drugs that women take in an emergency to prevent unwanted pregnancies have a certain, or rather literally 1% risk. They may not work. And that's when Christina chuckled bitterly. She was back in the story. She was in that 1% of women who do get pregnant, even though they did everything they could to keep it from happening. That was the reason the tests were hinting at pregnancy. Dr. Stone had asked her to come in. Christina had just spoken to him, as well as 2 other doctors and the clinic staff psychologist. She was offered a sedative, but she refused. As if that would do her any good. Roger laid out all the options for fixing the problem. Apparently, it didn't occur to him that a woman could make a decision other than that. But Christina didn't. She was shocked, horrified, and generally thought she was dreaming and seeing a nightmare. When she was told she was pregnant, but she also suddenly realized that she couldn't so easily get rid of what was inside her. Dr. Stone and his colleagues convinced her that it was not yet a person, but just a collection of cells, and that this procedure, due to the cause of the pregnancy, violence could, under state law, be performed at a much later date. They convinced Christina that she should go to the clinic right away, but she said she needed to think about it. She waved off the psychologist who seemed, with eyes burning with faith in her truth, intent on changing her mind right now. But Christina, she really needed to think about this and the fact that she was now carrying a baby child under her heart. And he's this tiny creature. He's already alive. And he's not guilty of anything. It was strange, but it was thinking about him that helped. Christina right now decided not to take a cab home, but to take a little walk first, and then maybe even go somewhere for a cup of coffee. And then she has to eat. Yeah, now she has to eat, thought girl. Even for 2, she smiled. And then she thought, she'll come home. But first a little walk, she deserved it. Time to get back to life, no matter what. And to spite everyone. The entrees came out typically American: double scrambled eggs, fried bacon, toast with cheese, orange juice, a large cup of black coffee, and 2 pieces of apple pie with ice cream. After the cafe, Christina was just walking down the street climbing around, and she suddenly felt so easy, like she was back in the past, when she had come to the U.S. as an even younger and more naive girl, believing that she had drawn the golden ticket of destiny and everything would be fine for her. Mrs. Smith. Christina sighed. Her name had been changed in America. The last name was often mispronounced. But was it really that hard to memorize? She was getting used to it, though. I'm sorry, we've met. She turned politely to some guy walking parallel to her on the street, and then I noticed he was holding a professional camera. Ms. Smith, our newspaper would like to. No, Christina shook his head. I don't do interviews. Don't please. We pay generously. The guy smiled and without asking permission, picked up the camera. Flash. There it is. Christina heard the exclamation and turned around. Eyes in her direction, a van of television crews sped away from it, barely slowing down. Some girl in a scarlet suit jumped out and rushed toward her on her heels, holding a microphone, followed by a guy with a video camera. Katie, what did you think of the ball? Judge, are you glad you have such a defense attorney? Since the judicial system is powerless, the reporter asked, why do you think the judge chose your case? Women are abused all the time. What attracted you to him, Katie? Rick did something particularly nasty to you. Our online hot stuff portal is willing to pay a $1,000 retainer for the racy details. Kathy, don't you think Rick might have videotaped the whole thing? They say you can already find it on the web. Are you willing to authenticate that you're in the video? The reporters were pushing back. She tried to say she didn't want to talk about anything or talk to anyone, but they wouldn't listen. They were advancing, clicking cameras, videotaping. Christina was lost. She was breathing in her eyes a lot. It was getting dark, and her heart was beating sporadically. Leave me alone, she exclaimed and flung herself to run down the street. Faster, even faster. Someone seemed to be chasing her. She turned around. Yes, she did. Christina ran out into another street. It's gone. No. A TV van came around the corner from Chelsea. Toward her, by the way, despite the red light. Christina looked around for poison. It's a long way to the subway. You can't catch a cab at rush hour. Journalists, they are not ravenous wolves, but from their intrusive attention she was covered with panic, and it seemed for some reason that something might happen to the child. Katie, how would you comment on the adjournment of the trial? You know why Sebastian is here now. Christina darted sideways through the door of the first convenience store she saw. She slammed their windows shut or hung from the top of a tiny bell, returning the owners of the place about new customers. Christina looked around. It was some kind of gardening store. Forward, stretching out were racks of seedlings and potted plants. Against the wall loomed inventory and bags of fertilizer containers. Christina was offering candy when she realized that one of the journalists was coming right this way, camera at the ready to pour in unceremoniously with questions. Christina started sobbing hysterically. You're okay. Is something wrong? There was a voice over her shoulder, and she jumped. Her nerves were shot. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. I smiled guiltily at the strange guy. Definitely not a journalist, Christina thought. No camera, and he didn't seem dangerous. A simple guy, about 25 years old, blonde hair, dressed in scarlet jeans, a white t-shirt, and over it, a plaid shirt on his feet, cowboy boots. Only thing missing is a hat to match them. No, I'm not. Honestly answered Christina with excitement, not even realizing that she had switched from English to her native Russian. Please, there's a back door. No need. She didn't have time to finish. Two journalists flew into the store. Stop. The guy in the plaid shirt was between them in a flash, and Christina blocked her. This is private property. What do you want? Christina felt more small and defenseless than ever. With awe and delight, she watched the guy tell the reporters to turn off the cameras. Just then, another man came up, a tall, red-haired, bearded man who looked like a grizzly, and introducing himself as the owner of the store, threatened the press with the police and trouble. In fact, if they don't get out now. Thank you. Christina exhaled. She almost slid down the wall. Her knees went weak. She was shaking. The owner of the store, his name was Jim, took her into the back room and gave her coffee, sandwiches, Estonians, mumbled that when you're stressed, the first thing to do is raise your glucose and fuel your body with protein. The guy in the plaid shirt introduced himself as Kevin. Yeah, he turned out to be Russian, and it made Christina feel even better. She had not talked to her compatriots for a long time from the easy conversation of the small company. It turned out that Kevin came to the U.S. for 3 months to get acquainted with the achievements of local agriculture and buy some equipment and other things, because he owns a farm back home in Russia. And now sometimes he travels around the world, adopting positive experience and innovations useful for other farmers. I don't know what attracted them so much. Jim grinned. Are you a pop star by any chance? No. Christina shook her head and thought that she would have burned with shame if these people had known what she was, so to speak, famous for in the press a few months ago. Journalists. They're like that too. Jim scratched his beard thoughtfully. Hey, Kevin, you could use a ride home. I think I got a hunch those jackals might be circling around here somewhere. Take the back door. We have our own parking lot, he explained to Christina. That way you can get home safely. Thank you. Christina agreed. Before she left, Jim handed her a pot of indoor violets just for her pretty eyes. And to keep smiling, laughing more often, he said. Christina gratefully accepted the gift. Kevin drove carefully and kept out of the conversation. But the conversation did get going. He was 30 years old. He was born and grew up in the Urals. And there also lived, and now there is a mom and dad, and also 2 younger sisters, and the whole family lives together and help run the farming business. Christina told us a little bit about herself. Naturally, bypassed all the tragic events of the last few days. Well, here we are. Kevin smiled. Have a good evening. He waved goodbye and left. He's a nice guy, I guess, Christina thought as she looked at his car. Interesting. She sighed sadly, thinking that if her life hadn't been so tragic, who knew, maybe she would have been happy to meet a guy like that. For some reason, she thought Kevin was a good man. It was getting dark. The streetlights were on. Christina headed towards her house. It was strange, but for some reason she felt better at the end of the day than she had at the beginning, despite everything she'd learned, despite everything that had happened. It's okay, Christina thought. She just needed to rest now, get a good night's sleep, and then she will definitely think about everything and make the right decision about everything. That's it. It's time to go home. It was not far away. All she had to do was pass an alley with 3 turns, passing by an abandoned old movie theater building and a social high-rise. It was always so dark and gloomy and deafening. It was full of trash cans that no one was in a hurry to clean up. Sometimes you could even find homeless people here. And on the sides of the buildings that formed the alley, the fire escape ladders had changed. But hello, a painfully familiar voice made me stop. My feet felt like they sank into concrete. There was a buzzing in her head. Christina slowly turned her head. It was him, Rick. What do you need? She asked. Instinctively, she took a step back. You know, when this whole thing first started, I thought it would be easy with you, he said, and took a step toward her. I thought all I had to do was give you money. People like you always shut their mouths, but it's only worth it to give them a few 1,000. He smirked and gave her a special look, closed his mouth and ready to spread his legs. But that's not what you turned out to be. A pretty, proper girl, pure and innocent. You know what's rare today at your age? Yeah, among students. You know, I wouldn't mind paying you more, but you're a stubborn little Russian vixen. Do you have nice hair? He grinned and licked his lips. So red. You're all beautiful, juicy sweetness. Tell me, how much money did you want? 100,000 isn't enough, yes. He doesn't want your money. Christina spit it out. She took offense. But why is there not a soul on the street today? Yeah, it's weird. Rick tilted his head to the side. So you're really offended? Well, can I understand that? But you know what I can't understand? That you haven't realized you don't want to mess with people like me. You think my father's gonna let me go to jail. Your father hit you in front of everyone, Christina said, and hopefully added more afterward. Yeah, that's my old man, Rick chuckled. Thinks you have to live by some kind of rules, and there shouldn't be any for people like us, the upper class. I've done what I want all my life. And you little shit don't win this case, I will. Christina lifted his chin. Fear was there, but it was overshadowed by rage. You think this is easy for me? You think I'm not ashamed that so many people know about all the dirt you've done to me? You know, 100 times I wanted to stop it all, just run away and forget it. But then I realized no, it's wrong, because you're gonna hurt someone else, and someone has to stop you. What else? Christina didn't finish. She just choked on air because she suddenly saw a figure in a black hoodie without a uniform emerge from around the corner behind Rick's back. His head was hidden under a hood, and instead of a face, a scarlet mask of a repentant demon face. Rick from behind exclaimed Christina. It came out so instinctively that the guy was surprised, but didn't look back. You're totally sick. He twisted his finger at his temple. What's behind you? There's someone in a mask. Laughter. Alex, tell me the Scarlet Judge is here for me. Christina didn't know exactly what the legendary maniac was supposed to look like, or his, as Sebastian warned, imitators, but something told her it was him. Dad's out of his mind. Alex chuckled. He thinks I'm going to run around cowardly, hiding in the middle of nowhere. It's all journalistic nonsense. No Scarlet Judge. He must have heard footsteps behind him, because Rick turned lazily over his shoulder, and the mysterious masked figure quickened his pace, and in his hand gleamed cold, sharp steel. Run after Christina screamed. It came out instinctively. She just saw the mortal danger and felt it on a cellular level. That in a moment's hesitation, the maniac would catch up with his victim. Christina hated Rick, her teacher, but she was horrified at the thought that right now he would just be finished off in a dark alley. This unknown criminal Rick rushed through the alley. Theoretically, there should have been a through passage to the other side of the street. There were cars rushing by. There were convenience stores, and across the street was the building where Christina had an apartment. They rushed there together, and Christina stared in incomprehension at the bars blocking the exit from the alley. Previously, this small metal gate was always closed, and it was unclear who needed to sliding the old cold structure, reminiscent of the divorced doors in old elevators. But the fact was here, in the alley was a dead end, and on the grate hung a brand new lock, fastening it to a post. Help! Shrieked Christina, trying to attract the attention of the people in the street. Her scream was drowned out by the rumble and music of cars starting up. It was a rowdy bunch of rappers, putting audio speakers out of car windows, driving somewhere. A fire escape, Rick exclaimed. He realized, too, that even if they were spotted from across the street, they wouldn't be able to break the lock and let them out in time. The maniac would be the first to arrive, so the people on the other side would only get a free thrill. The old movie theater in the 60s with the fancy club only had 2 floors, so the climb wasn't long. Christina knew that there must be fire escapees on the other side of the building as well, and they would lead them out onto a normal busy street. Rick jumped on her arm, helping her up onto the roof. Where to now? I don't have wings. We'll come down the other side. She pointed across the roof. Behind them, iron rumbled behind them. The maniac climbed up next. How? And why are you helping me? Rick exhaled. When did they go through the roof? I don't know, answered Christina honestly. Let's run. There were about 5 meters left, when Rick suddenly stumbled banally, and my leg howled. Boy, get up. Christina came running back to him. Get up now. I think I broke it. How's it hurt? Rick's sobs. Christina wanted to say something about twisting it most, but aghast when she saw what had happened. The thing was, apparently, this old building was being renovated, but it had stalled, and there was a pile of debris, building blocks of some kind. Rick caught on something, not just fell. His ankle fell between 2 concrete blocks, and now there was an unnatural twist, and the pant leg of his light-colored pants was quickly turning dark in that spot. An open fracture. A thought crossed Christina's mind. With a guy like that, he was no longer a fugitive. But the next few moments, A figure in a hoodie appeared on the roof, bowed his head, examining the picture open before him, and waved his hand as if to say to the fugitive, "Hello, you weren't expecting me. But that's okay. It's going to be a lot of fun, but not for everyone." "No," whispered Rick. "No, please, no." Christina, you still in the eyes in horror, retreated. That's it. Her tormentor, the man who had foully abused her, lying defeated by the will of chance, the one who will execute vengeance, comes to her. Christina struggled heavily, but the maniac did not seem to be interested in her. He stood a couple of steps away from his prey while he readied his hand with a large, the kind of garlic used in markets and butcher shops, as if applying it to something he'd already started with. Christina remembered that the Scarlet Judge seemed to hunt only men. There was no mention of him targeting women. I mean, random witnesses. Who knows? But after all, she's the victim the madman is supposedly avenging. Christina took a decisive step, but not towards the rescue, but towards the judge. "Listen," she said. "Don't, please." She put her hands out in front of her. "Please him. I know you came after him because of what he did. He hurt me. He broke my life. It's true." Tears came out of Christina's eyes. "But everything has to be right. It's the right thing to do. I don't want him to die for it. He committed a crime, but he doesn't deserve to be your prey. Please don't hurt him. I'm begging you." And the judge bowed his head again. He was clearly pondering what he had said. He turned his head, looking at Rick, then at Christina. Suddenly, a distinctive sound in the police sirens cut through the noise of the street. The intersection was visible from the rooftop, and Christina realized a string of police cars swerving toward them. Saved. Except, she thought logically, that now the maniac must dash, run, to avoid being captured. Allah and the judge. It all happened in a matter of moments. He dashed black with gleaming steel, shadowed toward his victim, and the girl's shriek merged with the last scream of the man who had abused her. "No," whispered Christina, unable to take her eyes off the sight that said it was all over for Rick. "No, no, don't cry." The voice behind the mask sounded distorted, quiet, and muffled. But Christina looked up in amazement. "Don't cry," repeated the Allah and the judge. "Something has happened that the law would not do. No, this is wrong." Shaking her head, Christina wanted, pressing his hands to his stomach. "I could have forgiven him and forgotten everything. He didn't deserve that. He was bad." Spread his hands, and the judge. "You know that, don't you?" "He did. I should have told him." Christina hardly paid attention to the rescue team that came. She was shaking. The world was spinning. She thought she was going to faint, but she didn't. "I would forgive. I would let go." She whispered in a colorless voice. "He didn't even know that I was pregnant." That the figure in the hoodie twitched. Hearing that clearly shook her curses. "No." Christina shook her head. "I'd forgive him. And the child is not his fault. You have to get rid of him." The voice beneath the mask appeared with threatening notes. That now Christina looked confused. What does he have to do with it? It's just a child. It's not his father's fault. This child is a product of vice. He doesn't belong in this world. The police were on the loudspeaker. And then the fire escape rattled. Armed cops were coming up to the roof. "Drop your weapon. Hands on your head." It must have come out of shock. But Christina didn't notice how the Scarlet Judge had crossed the distance separating them and was literally at arm's length. Now she could see the eyes of the maniac in the slit of their mask. And why? Why did they seem so familiar? Like his voice. "I'm sorry, but you'll thank me later." The masked figure exclaimed and raised his arm, ready to rain down a blow on Christina. And the judge aimed right at her stomach. The girl shrieked and recoiled, clasping her eyes in horror. In the next instant, the ordinary palette of sounds of evening city life was torn apart by other sounds. The policeman opened fire on them, and the judge fell. The mask flew off his face, and the last thing Christina saw before a deep faint engulfed her was the face of her attorney, Jane Pierce's wide-open eyes. Jane stared lifelessly into the starry sky. Miss, can you hear me?" Christina felt herself being scooped up in her arms as police officers yelled for medics, and then blackness ate everything. She woke up in a hospital, IVs searching for equipment, the attentive faces of doctors. They talked to her, told her she would live. She wasn't hurt, not seriously hurt, but she had hit her head in the fall and had a mild concussion. Also, too much stress had hit her body, and she had lost her baby as a result. The police came by, detectives came by. They gave her all the answers. Yes. Copycats of the legendary maniac turned up. Jane Pierce, for over 2 years, the brilliant lawyer led a double life, evidence of which was found in her home, including her carefully kept diaries and trophies, personal items she took from each of her victims. Journalists, by the way, were also raring to see Christina, but they were not allowed in. With each day in the clinic, the girl was slowly improving, but she had absolutely no idea what to do with her life next. The trial, of course, did not take place, and the case was closed. "Who wants to come and see me?" asked Christina to the nurse who peeked in to ask if she should let the visitor in. "He said his name was Kevin Sidorov," answered the nurse. "He asked to be reminded about the violets." Ugh. Christina sat up on the bed. "Yes," she said. "He's allowed to come in." Christina frantically fiddled with the sheet in her fingers. What would he want? She allowed the idea that this worse guy had come to ask about her health. But it also meant he knew her whole story. And that was just awful. So when Kevin entered the room, Christina was crying. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she replied. "Did you see it on the news?" he said. And he came closer, handed her a bouquet of field daisies. A few minutes of awkward silence. "Getting ready." He nodded at a few textbooks lying on the nightstand. "Yep," nodded Christina. This decision was not easy, but she realized that she could not otherwise, and she would finish her studies. "I'm already writing my diploma." "I almost bought mine," Kevin smiled. "Silly grandpa," he found out. And the next couple of hours flew by. They suddenly found it easy and simple to talk about everything. And Christina even began to smile. Kevin came to visit her, and over the next few days, he never directly expressed pity, as if he realized it wasn't what she needed. And then, "I'm flying home tomorrow," he said one day. Oh, Christina looked away. She knew this had to happen. After all, he had said before that he wouldn't be in America for long, but still it was difficult and unexpectedly hard to learn of the imminent separation. "Christina," Kevin allowed himself something he had never done before. He took her hand. "There's something I have to tell you." Christina had never believed in fairy tales of love at first sight in her life, and she never would. Had anyone told her before that this was what would happen to her? But it did. Kevin fell in love with her definitively, and in an instant. He promised he'd be back soon, just in time for her graduation. And in fact, he suggested he might stay a while. But that was up to her. Christina said no, she could manage, and he should go back to his family. And things on the farm need to be taken care of. Attention. And then she got her diploma. And that same day, Kevin proposed to her. And then she came back with him. His family welcomed his daughter-in-law well. And in these people, Christina found her kin. Although her ambitious dreams of big environmental projects were in the past, she still did a lot. Now she helped her husband with the family farm business and became the head of a charitable organization that cared about preserving local nature. And in this marriage, exactly 10 years after Christina and Jenya met, 2 twin children, a boy and a girl, were born.